In this video, we uncover a murder so horrifying it shook the entire nation. Saturday, January 14th, 2017, Iceland. It is very dark in the industrial area of Harbor Fjord, which is a port city. There is a wind from the North Atlantic howling through the space between three huge oil tanks. There is only building waste, pipe lengths, and frozen snow around them. Two young men, brothers who are volunteer hunters, are carefully going over this empty land. They do not have any special gear. They only have billing information from cell phones that shows the last signal came from this block. The light from a flashlight shines through the darkness and hits something black that is lying on the snow next to a bunch of pipes. One of the brothers moves toward me. These are Dr. Martin's boots. The shoes are not strewn around. It looks like the person who wore the boots just stepped out of them and into the cold void. The young guys pull out their phones and look at the find next to pictures from an online alert about a missing person that has been going around for a day. Everything about the dress that Berna Brian's daughter was wearing fits the description. The style, the color, the lacing, everything. Before we dive into the full story, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more gripping real-life crime stories that uncover the dark truths behind some of the most shocking cold cases. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you're always the first to know about every new update, every shocking revelation, and every twist that these cases bring. I also want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me which country you're watching from. It's truly amazing to see how far these stories travel and how many people across the globe are drawn to uncovering the truth. Your support doesn't just keep these stories alive, it honors the victims, reminds us of the importance of seeking justice, and ensures these cases are never forgotten. Now, let's get started. After a short time, police sirens break the quiet in the industrial zone. When the patrol officers arrive, they quickly put up tape around the outside. At this point, there is no going back for the police in Reykjavik. It doesn't make sense that the girl could have stayed with friends. In Iceland, no one walks home barefoot through the snow for some reason. The finding at the port changes the case from looking for a missing person to looking into a crime. It's now time for the search to get going. You have to go back about 30 hours to figure out how those black boots got among the old pipes. In Reykjavik, Saturday mornings start off by throwing everyone off their usual schedule. Maria comes to work in the fashion area of a big department store. She is close with Berna Brian's daughter and works there. They knew each other's plans, so Berna's absence makes people wonder. People knew they could count on Berna because she never missed work without giving. Notice, when Maria gets her phone, she calls her friend. The call stops right away. The phone is either turned off or doesn't have power. That's not like Berna. She always let her family and friends know where she was. Maria calls the people that Berna had been with on Friday night. The group broke up at the club, it turns out. The other people left around 2 a.m., but Berna said she would stay and dance for a few more hours. She never got home. After that, Maria calls Berna's dad's house on the landline in the suburbs where Berna lived, but no one replies. Maria calls Sila, Berna's mother, because she thinks this isn't just a normal late arrival. When Sila finds out that her daughter isn't at home, at work, or on the phone, she goes right to the police station in Reykjavik. The duty officers don't say much in reaction. People have long thought of Iceland as one of the safest places in the world because violent crime is so uncommon there. The police officers listened to the mother, but they didn't do anything. The investigation is based on a common situation. The girl may have stayed the night with people she met at the party, or she may have forgotten to charge her phone. The family tells her to go home and wait until late at night to call them on her own. Sila didn't do what the cops told him to do and wait. On the same Saturday, she wrote a long Facebook post about what her daughter was wearing the night she disappeared. People all over social media shared the post very quickly. Sila couldn't sleep that night because he kept calling emergency services to ask for information. That stress paid off. By 9 a.m. Sunday, the government shared information about phone bills. That quickly put an end to the idea that Berna had just stayed out late. The last time her phone was seen was at 5:50 a.m. Saturday, about 6 miles south of Reykjavik, in the Harbor Fjord port city's industrial zone. Soon, those exact locations would lead people to the oil tanks. Before you can understand how bad what happened next was, you need to know who this young woman was. It was 1996 when Birna Brian's daughter was born. Sela and Birna, her parents, had split up, but they stayed close and promised to raise her together. She grew up knowing that both her mother and father were there for her. Birna moved in with her dad in a neighborhood of Reykjavik when she was 20 years old. It was only a 30-minute walk to the city center. Bianca's family and friends said she had a strong spirit. For her, making a life on her own terms was important. She was a fashion worker at a big department store and made enough money to live on her own without her parents' help. Her friends called her the happy pill because she was always positive and could make any room brighter. She lived her life through music. She liked a lot of different kinds of music, from hip-hop to folk, and she often went to festivals and shows. She liked to drive too. Her dad often let her use his car. In Iceland's winter, when the days are only 5 hours long, people tend to stay inside. By Friday night, January 13, 2017, Birna finished her job and went to a cozy bar to play cards with her friends. After midnight, when it got darker, the group went to a famous nightclub downtown. Video footage and reports from witnesses show that Birna was completely calm that night. She was one of the first people on stage when the live music began. She and her friends called it a night and went home around 2 a.m. It was Birna who told them she wasn't done yet. It was her wish to stay and dance for a longer time. This is exactly what she did. She kept having fun by herself in a club in the middle of the city where she grew up. Something else was going on in the background while Birna danced in downtown Reykjavik. It happened at the harbor in Harbor Fjord, just a few miles to the south. One of the boats there was the Polar Nanok, a Greenlandic fishing ship. Thomas Moller Olsen, a 25-year-old crew member, was on board. He wasn't just a visitor to Iceland. His way of life was very different from that of the young people in the area. Thomas Moller Olsen wasn't a new person when he got to Iceland. He had been to Greenland before. Back at home, he had a record for selling drugs that were against the law. Besides that, he had a clear physical background. As a mixed martial arts practitioner, Thomas was in great shape. Even though he had a girlfriend, he wasn't at home that night and was out having fun. Some of the crew could go on shore leave since the trawler was parked and unloading. Thomas hired a red Kia Rio from a nearby car service to get around. He wasn't by himself. Nicholas Olsen, another team member, joined him. Later, investigators would stress this point again. Even though Thomas and Nikolaj had the same last name, they weren't connected. They were only linked because they worked on the same ship. When the sailors got in the rented car they drove to the city, they were going to Reykjavik's bars and having a night of drinking. The red Kia went into the city limits and started driving around on the same streets that people were having fun on the weekend. From that point on, the paths of a 20-year-old woman walking home from a party and a sailor on parole started to cross. By Monday, the investigators were busy going through surveillance tape. They started to look at the early hours of Saturday morning, frame by frame, trying to figure out what Birna Brian's daughter did. Even though many of the cameras weren't very good, and only some streets in Reykjavik were covered, detectives were still able to put together a schedule. CCTV video from 5 a.m. showed Birna leaving the club. She bought a falafel from a street seller and began walking up Laugavegur, which is Reykjavik's main shopping street. The video showed her by herself. She walked with shaky steps and seemed to stumble a little. At one point, she dropped a bunch of coins on the ground, stopped to pick them up, and then kept going. The important moment happened as she walked by the unique front of a bar called Lebowski. A red Kia Rio came into view a few seconds later. The way the car was acting caught the attention of police right away. It went by in one way and then came back not long after. The date told a scary story. Half an hour after Birna walked by, the red Kia drove by the same spot next to the bar. These are the last known pictures of her living. There was a surveillance blind spot, or a piece of road that wasn't covered by cameras, after that stretch of road. The girl, Birna, walked into the dark. Behind her, the Kia Rio turned in. Later video from cameras a few blocks away didn't show either the person walking or the car again. The car wasn't easy to figure out. The license plate couldn't be read on the Laugavegur video taken at night. Iceland has more than 100 red Kia Rios on file. It would take too long for the agents to check all of them, so they narrowed their search. Detectives asked for security footage from the Harbor Fjord port, which is where Birna's boots were found by volunteers. That plan worked out. Security video showed that at 6 a.m., the red Kia Rio arrived at the port area on Saturday, 1 hour after Birna's was last seen in downtown Reykjavik. The car drove toward the dock where the Polar Nanok boat was tied down. The car pulled up next to the gangway, and a man got out of the passenger side. Later, police confirmed that the man was Nikolai Olsen. He was moving all over the place. The sailor looked like he was off balance and quickly made his way back to the ship. Thomas Mahler Olsen, the driver, didn't get on. His crewmate was dropped off, and he turned the car around and left the port area, going back toward the city. Later, cameras caught him going back to the ship much later that morning. As Thomas was leaving his shift, though, he did something that the police eventually saw as an attempt to destroy evidence. Surveillance video showed him carefully wiping down the surfaces inside the rental car, even though it was early, and he was tired from not getting enough sleep the night before. When detectives asked the rental company for records, they confirmed what they already thought. The name of Thomas Mahler Olsen was used to rent the red Kia Rio. It was now known for sure who the two men in the car that night were. But the investigation team missed their chance to make an arrest on the shore. It was already Saturday afternoon when the Polar Nanok left the Harbor Fjord port after unloading all of its cargo. The suspects were now at sea, and with each hour that went by, they were moving farther away from Iceland. Because of how the ship was legally, things got more difficult. The ship was flying the flag of Greenland, so any action had to be coordinated with the Danish government. It might take days to deal with red tape. Detective Grimson knew that if they were late, important information could be lost. After a number of important talks, a tactical operation was given the go-ahead. The captain of the ship agreed to help and quietly turned off connections so that the crew couldn't find out about the raid from the news. The arrests were carried out by Iceland's Viking Squad, an elite police special forces team. Officers got into a Coast Guard chopper and took off into the North Atlantic. The weather was terrible. Pilots had to find their way through a storm front with waves that were over 26 feet high. It was dangerous to land on a shaky fishing boat in those conditions, but there was no time to wait. People from the Special Forces quickly climbed onto the deck as the chopper hovered over the back of the Polar Nanok. It worked because there was a surprise. The team didn't fight back. Officers quickly put Nikolai Olsen and Thomas Mahler Olsen apart. There were guards outside the doors of each of the two suspects' rooms while they were restrained and moved to different ones. The investigators made a smart choice. At sea, no one would question you. The most important thing was to get the suspects and the ship back to Iceland so that a full forensic search could be done. The captain of the Polar Nanok was told straight out to change direction. The boat, which is now thought of as a floating crime scene, started its trip back to Reykjavik with armed Icelandic special forces on board. The suspects were kept in complete isolation until the ship arrived. They were not allowed to talk to each other or align their stories. Since the Polar Nanok got to the harbor in Reykjavik, investigation teams have been in charge of the whole ship. The police began to search every square inch in a planned way. The whole ship was seen as a possible extension of the crime scene. Police found a hidden stash in Thomas Mahler Olsen's cabin, tightly packed bricks of a compressed material. After tests, it was found to be marijuana, weighing 23 kilos, about 50 liter. The charges against him were increased after that finding, and major drug trafficking was added to the investigation into the missing woman. The drugs, on the other hand, were quickly forgotten. The search teams made a big discovery when they looked at the ship's trash cans and incinerator. Police found a driver's license buried in the trash. The owner was Berna Briansdottir. The plastic card found on a Greenlandic ship was the first piece of physical proof that directly linked the missing woman to the Polar Nanok crew. She could no longer believe that she had just been picked up and dropped off. At the same time, the red Kia Rio was being looked at by evidence teams. Before giving it back, Thomas Mahler Olsen cleaned the inside very carefully. Even though he tried to erase the past, the strong smell of heavy-duty cleaners was still there. Investigators found faint brownish spots on the back seat after taking off the upholstery and using forensic tools to look through the cabin. For this type of important case, Iceland did not have the advanced DNA testing that was needed, so samples had to be sent right away to a lab in Sweden by air. There was no question about the answer, which came quickly. Berna Briansdottir's blood was found in the car. Because there was a blood match in the car, and her ID was found in the trash on the ship, the case was renamed. It was no longer said that Berna was lost. She was now being sought by police. The search had grown to be the biggest operation of its kind in Iceland's recent history by January 22nd. Hundreds of volunteers and worried citizens scoured the coastlines, empty land, and abandoned buildings for 8 days straight, even though it was below freezing outside. It was getting less likely that Birna would be found living, but the country still wanted to know what happened. Along a remote stretch of coastline on the Reykjavik Peninsula, things took a turn for the worse. A search team in an Icelandic Coast Guard chopper found a body on the black volcanic sands near the Selvogsviti lighthouse. The body had been washed ashore by storm waves. This lonely stretch of beach was more than 25 miles from the center of Reykjavik and a long way from the port where Birna Briansdottir's phone had last rang. Right away, a ground team was sent out, and they quickly confirmed what everyone in the country thought. The lost 20-year-old was the person who died. She wasn't wearing anything. The clothes she wore to leave the club could not be found. They were probably washed away by the ocean. The body was taken to the morgue, where forensic doctors started their investigation. The story made me feel bad. Her face had many bruises and cuts from being hit hard. There were deep signs of tension in her neck, which meant she had been strangled. The pattern of the injuries pointed to a long, violent attack, but there were no signs of personal violence. It shook the country when they said what caused the death. Forensic tests showed that Birna Briansdottir had seawater in her lungs, which means that she was still alive when she went into the freezing Atlantic, even though she had hit her head and died of asphyxiation. The doctor's report said that she drowned and died. The person who did it threw her into the ocean while she was still alive. The finding was quickly told to everyone on the island. Iceland, which is not used to seeing such violence, went into a state of mourning. Lots of flower and candle memorials sprung up on Reykjavik's main street and in front of Birna's family house. People used the term Mýris Egger a lot on social media. The Birna was a sign of how unsafe people felt in a country. On the other hand, investigators were up against a well-thought-out plan to throw them off track. Thomas Mahler Olsen didn't say anything. Instead, he tried to lead the probe astray. He kept changing his story during 9 long interrogations, trying to fit each new piece of proof the detectives brought up with his old story. At first, he said he had no contact with Birna. When the cops showed that she had been in his car, he changed his story. He said he dropped her off in a neighborhood of Reykjavik, where she was safe and sound. He changed his story again when more proof started to show that his explanation wasn't working. This time, he said that his crewmate Nikolai Olsen had been the last person to see her, but Nikolai Olsen went in a different direction. He made the decision to work with the police. He had a fuzzy memory of the night because he had been drinking a lot, but his story was always the same. They did pick up Birna downtown, but he insisted that as soon as they got back to the port, he went right to his cabin to sleep and never saw her again. Police used digital tracking and video footage to confirm his story. Data from cell towers and records made by port cameras proved his innocence. At that time, Birna was still in the red Kia Rio when it left the port and went toward the farthest, least populated edges. Nikolai was already on the polar Nanook when the call came. He never went back to shore. Thomas Mahler Olsen was the only person who could have done it, and there was a lot of proof against him. The forensic lab was done looking over the things that were found early in the probe. Experts were able to find Thomas's DNA on the laces of Dr. Martin's boots that were found by volunteers near the oil tanks. His print was also discovered on Birna Briansdottir's driver's card, which was the same one that was found in the ship's trash. The last piece came from new surveillance video from a nearby grocery store. Thomas was caught on camera buying strong chemical cleaners and rags on Saturday morning after Birna went missing. These are the same things he tried and failed to clean blood off of the rental car's back seat. We need to go back to Harbor Fjord early on January 14th to tie everything together. Using digital tracking and statements from witnesses, investigators put together the following timeline. The red Kia Rio was going through the middle part of Reykjavik. Thomas Mahler Olsen was sober and behind the wheel. There was Nikolai Olsen in the passenger seat. He was either asleep or very drunk. The car stopped near Birna Briansdottir around 5:25 a.m. It's likely that she thought the car was a cab or agreed to take a ride. She sat down in the back. They went south toward Harbor Fjord. It took 40 minutes to drive. The car was at the dock by 6 a.m. Nikolai got out of the car and onto the polar Nanook, where he struggled to stay standing. He then went to his cabin to sleep. Birna stayed in the car with Thomas by herself. The engine wasn't turned off. He instead took off from the port and drove the car into an empty area. He pulled over to the side of the road there. The Recreation says that Thomas got into the back seat. His fists hit Berna in the face several times, breaking her nose. He then started to choke her. She passed out, but she was still living. He kept driving for about 25 miles until he got to the coast of the Reykjanes Peninsula, close to the Selvogsviti lighthouse. He thought she was gone or trying to undo what he had done. Then he took her out of the car and left her in the cold North Atlantic. Still dazed, Berna breathed in and drowned without meaning to. Thomas went back to the city, stopped at a store, and bought cleaning materials. He then spent the rest of the morning trying to get the bloodstains out of the Kia Rio he had rented. The case against Thomas Möller Olsen began in August 2017 in the District Court of Reykjavik. The accused used a technique of shutting down all of their emotions. He sat with his back to the courtroom and put his hands over his face to avoid looking at Berna's family and the reporters, who were all sad. The defense tried to offer different theories and said that investigators were putting pressure on them, but the court found that there was too much evidence to believe anything else. The decision was made public. In September, Thomas Möller Olsen was found guilty of killing Berna Brian's daughter on purpose and also of dealing a lot of drugs that are illegal. He was given 19 years in jail by the judge. Besides that, he had to pay the family of the victim 29 million Icelandic kronur, which is about $210,000, in fines and pay for all court costs. After Thomas's appeal was turned down by the Icelandic Supreme Court, he was sent to a prison in Denmark to finish his term. Because Nikolai Olsen participated in the trial, he was found not guilty of any crime and was freed. The formal part of the story ended in the fall, but the country said its emotional goodbye to Berna earlier. At her wake on February 3rd, more than 2,000 people showed up, which is a record number for Iceland. The president and prime minister of the country were there. The people of Iceland will never forget this terrible event. People used to feel safe enough in groups that they could leave their doors open and walk around alone at night. As a result, the government in Reykjavik quickly added more security cameras to the city. A young woman's death ended more than one life. Iceland's criminal justice past can be broken down into 3 parts: before Berna, during Berna, and after Berna. Thank you for joining me and watching this story unfold from start to finish. Real-life cases like this show us how unpredictable life can be and why it's so important to stay alert and informed. If this video kept you engaged, surprised you, or made you think, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next investigation. Your support helps this channel continue bringing these stories to light. I'd love to hear your perspective, so comment below. Share your thoughts, your theories, or the next case you'd like us to dive into. Every comment is read and helps shape the direction of the channel. And if you think someone else would find this video valuable or insightful, be sure to share it. When we spread awareness, these stories reach further and make a bigger impact. Always stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and look after yourself and the people around you. Life can change in a single moment, and being informed is one of the best ways to stay prepared. Thank you again for watching, supporting the channel, and being part of this growing community. Stay safe, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next video, where we uncover another story full of truth, mystery, and lessons worth knowing.